Enjoying the hot weather, I hope, folks. This also means that you can, maybe with the right citronella candles or DEET bug repellent, lay on a blanket at night and look up and see the stars. And when it's this warm, it's a good time to get familiar with the sky and just, enjoy the fact that if you live around here in Vermont or other places that are rural, you probably get to see a lot more stars than folks who live in a city. I grew up in Miami, and I remember only seeing dozens of stars in the sky. So I'm really happy to live in a place where as it gets dark, I see thousands and thousands of stars. So I want to talk about what the state of the sky is. And I wanted a little refreshment on what happened with Venus and Mercury, because Venus is getting hard to see and you still have a chance to see Mercury in the sky. And I also want to encourage everyone to watch the launch of the new Crew Dragon spaceship that's going to happen on Saturday. It was supposed to happen yesterday, and I was eagerly watching the launch stream live, and they had to scrub the launch at the last minute because of weather. So they postponed it till Saturday, and that means hopefully most people will be able to tune in and watch the launch of the first American-built and designed spacecraft since the space shuttle retired. And the space shuttle was designed in the 1970s. So we've come a long way in our technology since the 1970s. So this spaceship reflects that. I'll talk a little bit about that next, but let's start off by going into Stellarium. Oh, wait, I need to be able to share, Leela.
Oh, sorry.
All right.
There we go.
All right, here we go. Thank you. And again, if you're not familiar with Stellarium, it's free software available at stellarium.org. And this allows you to recreate the night sky based on your exact latitude or wherever you live. And you can go through time and fast forward through the day or even the years and see how things change. And I'm going to hit the L button, which fast forwards us through the day. And you can see the time here at the bottom of the screen, where now it's 4 o'clock in our virtual sky. And if you're wondering where Venus is, well, it's going to be tricky to see Venus. It's going to be behind that tree that Stellarium has built in the wrong spot at this time of year. I'm going to take that tree out of the sky, and we're going to have a virtual horizon right there. So let's just recreate that. Yeah, that would be right around sunset, which tonight is going to be at 8:22. In Stellarium, we're at 8:47, a little bit after that. But Venus, which has been so easy to see in the sky for months and months, is now doing its little dance with the sun, where it's going to disappear as it goes in the light of the sun out of our sight. So I'm trying to recreate that as much as I can. If you're looking for Venus tonight, you're probably going to lose your vision because it's going to be in the glare of the sunlight. There's the highlight there in Stellarium that tells you where it is. But the other planet that was visible in the sky, Mercury, is actually in a better position to see, which is a rare thing. Usually Venus is the one that's easy to see and Mercury is difficult, but check out where Mercury is. So here I'm going to put the ground back in. Oh, that tree in the way. But even though you have a much better chance of seeing Mercury than Venus, but notice how much brighter Venus is. Venus is easy to see because of that. Mercury is never that bright, and Mercury is actually farther away from us than Venus right now because it's on the other side of the sun. So if you can imagine the sun being the center of the racetrack, Mercury is coming around the stretch and around the corner on the far side of the racetrack, heading in our direction, but it's actually very distant compared to where Venus is, and that's why Mercury looks so dim. But Mercury is one of the hardest planets to see because of the fact that it's the closest planet to the sun. It's never distant from the sun's position in the sky, so you're never going to have a chance to see Mercury in the middle of the night when the sky is totally dark. So this is probably one of your best bets. And just because I have it set up this way, let me show you the little dance that the planets have been making over the last couple of nights. This is May 28th. On May 27th, you can see that Venus and Mercury were closer together, and Venus would have been easier to see. May 26th, May 25th. By the way, this big dot up here is the moon, which we'll be seeing tonight as a waxing crescent, but focus on the planets here. And let's go back to the 24th and the 23rd, and that's when you would have seen the moon and Venus and Mercury all together in a little tight little triangle here. That would have been a beautiful sight had you had the opportunity to see it, had the weather been clear for you. And there's the moon the next night. So that little conjunction with Mercury and Venus happened on the 21st of May. And that's when they were closest together. But putting it all together, the sun, Mercury, Venus, we have to also remember that the Earth is moving too. So we are contributing to the motion as well as the planet's motion. It's like we're inside of one of the race cars going around the track as well, and we're watching other cars going around the same racetrack in inner lanes. That's one way to think of how the planets move. So if on the 21st you were looking for that, I joked about this last time that the tree's always in the way with Stellarium, but in your life, I hope the tree wasn't in the way and you were able to see this conjunction. So now let me recreate the last week as we'll get back to now, 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, and 28th. And so you can see Venus is getting closer to the sun, but Mercury is still way out there. And just to predict a little bit of the future, the 29th, the 30th, you can see that by the end of May and on June 1st, Venus will pretty much be out of sight. It will be hanging out all by itself high up in that tree again. So there's a nice little window of opportunity that you have for the next couple of weeks to see Mercury, but you're not going to have long to see it. By the first week of June, Mercury too will be dipping down towards the sun, as it is the fastest moving planet. It goes around the sun in 88 days. So they named it aptly after the messenger god with wings on his sandals, because it really behaves that way in our sky. So let's get on with what else is happening in the sky. I can put the tree back on the horizon and zoom out a bit. Now, I did talk about the moon, and the moon is going to be right near the mouth of Leo the Lion. So let's stay up a little later with Stellarium so we can see the twilight fade. We'll see Mercury disappear on the horizon, but that's actually really lucky viewing conditions that you have such a long time to see it. Your Gemini, these are the Gemini twins. So this is one of the reasons why Mercury is in a good position to be seen for a while. All right. Well, none of us in Vermont have such a level horizon that we'd still be able to see Mercury by nearly 10 o'clock, but that's what time it is. Yes, because of our getting closer to the summer solstice, our days are very long, and you will have to wait till close to 10 o'clock before the sky is fully dark. And you won't need to wait till then to see the moon, which will be in a waxing crescent phase. But the moon happens to be right in front of Leo the Lion's head. And I happened to joke with a bunch of first and second graders from St. Johnsbury School that I did a planetarium class with this morning. They were a very fun audience. And I talked about how it looks like the lion of Leo is about to eat the moon. And if you go out tomorrow night, as remember, the moon goes around the earth once a month, it's always changing its position. Tomorrow night, it'll look like the moon is in the lion's belly. And then on the third day, you'll say that the lion has digested the moon and it is now behind the lion. So I won't make any crude jokes about that, but that moon sailing through the lion is not unusual. That happens every month. And Leo the Lion is one of the best constellations to see in our springtime sky. And the moon will make it particularly easy to find Leo tonight. I hope you have clear weather. And so in case you haven't seen Leo in one of my previous planetariums, let me just do the quick illustration here with the real stars and not just Stellarium's cartoon drawings, which actually do a good job of matching the lion. But the brightest part of the lion is his heart, Regulus. And then you have these stars that make his mane going around in a semicircle, and it ends here at this star that makes the eye of the lion and his nose. So if you imagine that hook shape, sickle shape there, you can easily see the lion's head. And then way out on the other end of the lion is the second brightest star, Denebola, which is the tail of the lion. And if you can see that bright star with Regulus and that hook shape of the head, your imagination will probably be able to fill in the rest, like these stars making his rear and his hind leg here. And this is his back. And then here is his belly. And you can see why the illustration that Stellarium provides in this case is pretty good for using it to find Leo the Lion. Or you can just go with their little connect the dot lines, which will remind you of the fact that Leo is strongly connected to Egyptian culture, and it may be what inspired the building of the ancient Sphinx. So that's one constellation I want you to see with the moon in it tonight. But I thought I would also talk about some of the constellations that are in the north. Last week, we talked about the beginning of being able to see Scorpius the Scorpion. There's the head of what the Abenaki folks call Champ or Gitaskog. And today, most Vermonters just call it Champ, the lake monster from Lake Champlain with its bright red heart, Antares. That's already visible by 10 o'clock tonight in the sky. But let's look towards the north. I feel like I've neglected the northern sky for a while in our planetarium shows, partly because the northern sky changes less, but there are changes in the north. Now, if you go into Stellarium's viewing options, you can do something with the markings and bring up something called the Circumpolar Circle. This is a line that shows you the stars that don't leave our sight. So everything inside of that circle will be visible, not just every night, but at every hour of the night. As the Earth turns, our view in the window allows us to see these stars only all the time. And in that circumpolar circle is, of course, the most famous part of the sky. Perhaps if you've never seen any constellations or star pictures, you've probably at least heard of the Big Dipper, or the drinking gourd, or the dog sled, or Il Carro, or Der Wagen, or all lots of different names that people around the world have given these stars. But here's the handle of the Big Dipper, and these are the four stars that make the scoop. And you can see why it looks like, at this time of year in the hot weather, an ice cream scoop. And you might want to use that to get some Bear Tracks ice cream. Oh, it's one of my oldest jokes. I apologize, but that's because the Big Dipper is not an official constellation, but a small part of a larger constellation that we know as Ursa Major, of course. And Ursa Major in Latin means the Big Bear. So there's a pretty good illustration right there of how you can add the stars to what I said was the Big Dipper and make that into the Big Bear. And that illustration also pretty well matches what my imagination sees in the star. So that bear, you've been tuning into previous presentations, you may have heard that the Greeks and the Romans were not the only culture to see a bear in these stars. In many American Indian nations, Native American folks, including the Abenaki Nation here in Vermont, have a story about a bear in those exact same stars. But in the Abenaki version of the story, what is a long tail in this strange bear is actually three hunters. And so there's a whole epic story about three hunters that chase the bear everywhere he goes in the sky. Oops, sorry, I did something weird there with my mouse. I apologize. And that bear is kind of appropriate in the following the story. That bear follows the circumpolar circle. That bear's always in the sky. But now that it's spring and the flowers are blooming and the first fruits are starting to appear in the forest, this bear looks like he's got his attention turned earthward with his nose leading the way towards the ground. So if you know that story, you can also just remember where to expect to find the Big Dipper and the Big Bear in the sky. It's always somewhere rotating around in the north, and in the spring, it's heading earthward looking for the food. And in the summer, as you'll see, if I advance time, keep your eye on the bear here. Let's put a highlight perhaps on the bear's nose, and then we'll see how, as I make time advance, it looks like the bear gets closer to the ground. Now, of course, I'm also up past midnight at this point in Stellarium. This is 1 o'clock in the morning. Now it's almost 2 o'clock in the morning. But if you do stay up late, you get to understand that circumpolar circle by watching that Big Dipper dip or watching that Big Bear head towards the earth. And in the end of summertime, when blackberries and raspberries are ripening on the vines and all the beech nuts and the acorns are finally becoming available, that bear will look like he's walking on the ground. So this is a great way to remember the position of this part of the sky. Ursa Major, the Big Bear. And by the way, the Abenaki name for this creature is Kitsiowasos, which means big bear in Vermont's oldest language. But let's talk about tonight what else is going to be going on in the north. So you've got the Big Dipper, the Big Bear up high, returning towards the earth as the night goes on. But there's something in the sky that never seems to move. And as soon as you can see the stars, you can use the stars of the Big Dipper to find Polaris, the North Star. And as the sky moves through the night, you'll notice that Polaris stands still. That's why it's so handy as a beacon for navigation, because it's always in the same spot. And its height above the horizon tells you exactly what your latitude is. And since we're here in northern Vermont, my latitude is about 44.5 degrees north latitude. That's how high up I will expect to find the North Star in the sky. And if you go down to Florida, that North Star will be lower in the sky. If you were in Havana, Cuba, you would be at roughly 23.5 degrees north latitude, and that star would be 23 degrees above the horizon instead of 44.5 as it is here. So that's one of the great things about the northern sky. And I also want you to know that there is another circumpolar constellation besides Ursa Major that you can always see. And this one is becoming more and more visible as we get into summer. So there's the Big Dipper. Remember that these two stars, Merak and Dubhe, draw the line. It's what I call in my planetarium shows in the museum, I used to call these the slurping stars. Depending on how many kids were in the audience, I would even make a kind of disgusting slurping sound, but they would all start repeating it, and then that they would hopefully remember it. That was the whole point. So these slurping stars will draw your eye towards Polaris, the North Star. If you ever get lost, that could save your life. But let's keep going past Polaris. Instead of stopping with the North Star, we can go all the way down towards the horizon, and we'll see that not far off of that line, just a little bit to the left of it, we have this little bunch of stars that sort of resemble the letter W right now. And a lot of people recognize this because it's a distinctive shape in the sky. It's called Cassiopeia. That's the name of the constellation. But even that little connected dot line looks like a W. That's what most people think of when they see it. But this is where I have a big dispute with the Stellarium illustration. Their version is upside down from the way I see it. But let me show you what I see when I look at these stars. First of all, the background is that Cassiopeia was once the Empress of Abyssinia. Abyssinia is what we know as Ethiopia today in Eastern Africa, and they had major trading relationships with the Greek Empire. So this story kind of reflects this intercontinental trade network that the Greeks had with the African Empire of the Abyssinia. And Cassiopeia was supposed to be a queen, an empress, but she was very vain. And this constellation represents her chair. There's actually a version of the story that says the chair should be empty because the queen was punished by being placed in a chair that will slowly rotate around in the sky. And when the chair got to the top, she fell out of the chair, kind of like that Dunk the Clown tank at the fair, where you pay money to throw a ball and see if you can make the guy fall out of his chair. Well, there's sort of a Greek myth where she was punished for her hubris in a similar contraption. And this is the chair, the dunking chair. So remember what I said about the bear walking in a circle around the circumpolar circle. This chair also tips around the circumpolar circle. So it makes sense that somebody, whoever imagined up the story of Cassiopeia in that chair, said, look, her chair's upside down. She must have fallen out. Who knows? I always think that the people who make up these myths must have been very corny. Maybe they were astronomers of their time, but I might have something in common with them. So let me show you how I see a chair instead of just a W. If you see the bright stars of the W, let's pretend that this bright star all the way to the right is the leg of one of the chairs. So here's the foot of the leg, and here's the top of the leg, and this is the top of the next leg. So now you have a nice little square to work with here. These are the two front legs of the chair. And then pretend that this other star is one of the corner of the seat. And this actually makes pretty cool kind of three-dimensional foreshortened artistic drawing of a chair. It looks like there's a back leg here, a front leg on the left and a front leg on the right, and then the seat where there's a cushy for the queen's tushy. And then here's one of the stars that makes the back of the chair, and here's the top of the chair, you know, where the finials would be. And here's the other finial at the top of the big throne. And then you can easily draw another line down to imagine, you see two parallel lines here, two parallel lines here, and another one here. And it's not too hard to imagine that that does look like a chair. So this is the time when you would actually want to sit in that chair, and just imagine how in the fall, when that is on the opposite side of the sky, it looks like the seat is up and the legs are up and the head is down, and you would fall out of that chair in that seated position. And Cassiopeia is always going to be in our sky, but I want to give you a heads up to looking for this constellation, because later on, as we go through the summer, you're going to notice that Cassiopeia, and specifically the back leg of her big throne, is going to be a guiding line that will help you find the farthest thing that your eyes can see. You don't have to wait till later in the summer to see it. You're just going to have to stay up way past your bedtime, at least midnight, to see this, which is now visible in the northeast. I'm trying to get it highlighted in Stellarium. For some reason, software is not cooperating. There it is, the Andromeda Galaxy. So that fuzzy patch visible tonight around 12:30. So I don't recommend you stay up late, because you won't have to wait. It'll be out in the evenings by the middle to the late summer instead of at midnight, and then you'll be able to see it. But the better you familiarize yourself with Cassiopeia, the more you're going to be able to find the Andromeda Galaxy. So speaking of that, big galaxies far away, I won't go into that until later on another future broadcast. We'll go into more detail, but something that is happening very soon, and not at midnight, but sometime on Saturday during the day. That's going to be weather dependent. I don't have an actual time, but I know they'll be streaming live at NASA. And I want to just show you a little bit about the mission that's called DM2 for Demo 2. This is a mission that will return Americans to space in a brand new rocket that looks like something out of the science fiction movies that I grew up watching. So let me show you what I mean. Here's the mission patch here. So 2011, this recognizes the last time we flew the space shuttle. And as I said earlier, the space shuttle was not designed, it was designed all the way back in the 1970s. So just imagine that we're using much newer technology with this new spacecraft. And here are the two astronauts that are bravely going to be launching on a spacecraft. It has been flown. I just should mention they did do a flight with a dummy inside, and that dummy was named Ripley, like the character from the Alien movie, Sigourney Weaver's character. And that flight was flawless, and that's what allowed them to take the chance by putting humans inside the Crew Dragon. So this is a long-awaited test, and it should go just perfectly fine. But these men are very brave for doing this, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. And the spacesuits that they're going to be wearing for this launch are very new, and they look straight out of the movies. They're designed by SpaceX to work with this spacecraft, and they're much less bulky and less, kind of cumbersome looking than what you may have seen in the past. Pretty slick stuff. And the inside of the ship is mostly touchscreen. Just think of how, the space shuttle was all these buttons and knobs, so 20th century. Now, this looks very much like the ship for the 21st century. So I wish these gentlemen and all the folks at NASA and SpaceX good luck, because this is a big moment. And just so you know, this is what the Crew Dragon looks like docked on the space station. This is from the time when they tested it without humans. If all goes well, within a few hours on Saturday, those gentlemen will be docking with the space station. And that will be a historic day in the history of space exploration. So let's hope it all goes well. And that'll be some welcome good news that we all would enjoy to see on Saturday. And up until that time, Leela, no questions floating in from the ether?
No questions. Sorry, Bobby, but I think that's awesome that if Saturday's clear, we get to see humans being put up into space. That is very cool.
Yeah, I'm sure you can make all your social distancing jokes about the astronauts, but in some respects, a space capsule is probably one of the safest places to be right now. So that's true. And I'm sure I know NASA's protocols for health have been so strict. I mean, even if you watch the movie Apollo 13, you see that one of the astronauts was not able to fly just because there was a chance that he might have the flu or a cold. So they don't take it lightly. They get tested constantly because they don't want to send somebody into space to find out that they're going to infect the rest of the crew on the ISS. And that definitely would be an issue in such tight quarters if you've ever seen how little that ship is. So anyway, keep looking up, folks. And thanks, Leela, for being such a great host. And
Yeah.
I hope to see you all next week.
Thank you, Bobby. This is awesome. And we will definitely see you next week. All right. Take care. Bye.